This is Marcus Washington from MTC Media with another episode of In This Corner. And we're going to start off with Naoya Inoue and Nonito Donaire 2. Now, these guys was coming off in 2019. It was the fight of the year. Inoue had won that by unanimous decision 116, 111, 114, 113, 117, 109. You might ask what took so long to get the rematch. The rematch came late because of things like COVID, so on and so forth. This kind of delayed it, and it was weird because here over in America that fight was fought on a Tuesday. So at 5:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, so it was weird, and so nearly 3 years later, after that was fight of the year, the second fight was not quite as compelling as Inoue knocked out Donaire in the second round. He had knocked him down in the first round with a short right hand. In the second round, that left hook of Inoue found a home, ended up putting Donaire back on his rear end, and they ended up stopping the fight. And my only question for Donaire is at your age, why did you agree to have puncher's gloves? Where it was going to be advantageous to the harder puncher. And I think that really hurt him figuratively and literally. The glove choice probably should have used something a little bit lighter, take a little bit more steam off of Inoue's punches. But again, that second fight, the rematch, did not live up to the first fight that was just 3 years ago. Part of that, the weekend had a couple of really good fights, and we're going to start with Devin Haney and George Kambosos for the unified title. And people have been calling Haney the email champ and all this sort of thing, but he goes down, underscores unanimous victory. I had my scorecard had it 118, 110. The official scorecards was 119, 109, 120, 108, 120. Oh no. Yeah, I'm sorry. The official scorecards, I had it 117, 111. The official scorecards was 116, 112, 116, 112, 118, 110. Haney controlled the fight with his jab. He didn't let Kambosos really get inside. I thought Kambosos didn't have a plan B when he could not cut the ring off, when he could not work when they got close. And frankly, he looked outclassed. And Haney, like I said, behind the jab, sort of set down his punches later in the fight, sending out a message to Kambosos. And there's a mandatory rematch, and we'll talk about rematches a little bit later, and why this probably didn't need a rematch, at least not immediately. The other fight for the weekend was Stephen Fulton against Daniel Ramon. Another great fight, another great matchup. Hey, give boxing his credit. They've had a lot of really good matchups. That was the fight where I scored 118, 110. The official scorecards had it 119, 109, 120, 108, and 120, 108. So I had it slightly closer. It was still a dominant win for Fulton. Fulton was coming off some tough physical fights, and he really used his movement, again, used the ring, stayed behind the jab, just sort of like what Devin Haney did, but in a more forceful way, stayed behind the jab against a really tough fighter in Ramon, but controlling the distance, controlling the movement, being the boxer in there. Ramon did try various things. He did go to a plan B and a plan C, and it just wasn't able to work against such a fighter like Fulton. Now, the last two rounds, this is what I loved about Fulton. The last two rounds, he got into the middle of the ring. He didn't have to. He got into the middle range, looked for some openings to land some really, truly power shots. And he did land some, sending a message to try to close the show, sending a message that this was going to be more than just a fight where he moved around. Definitely that was needed on his part. Great fight for him. So the weekend, Haney and Fulton get big wins. Now, I wanted to go back to the thing about mandatory rematches and why they're not good for boxing. There is no reason for, at this time, for Haney to fight Kambosos again, especially in Australia. And this idea that we need mandatory rematches are terrible. And I know that Aram has spoke out about them before, but let me go back in the day. If Leonard and Duran fight the second fight after both of them have tune-up fights and not 6 months later. Leonard Duran 2 is much better than what it was. It was a dreadful fight. It was dreadful. If there was time, and I know part of this was driven by controversy, but if there was more time between Alexis Arguello and his rematch with Aaron Pryor, that probably would have been a better fight. Now, I'm not saying that in either one of those two cases that the result would have been different, but the fight would have been better. Mandatory rematches are not needed. They weren't needed back then. They're not needed now. You can fight later down the road without there being a contractual obligation to fight it. And in Haney's case with Kambosos, he has to fight again in Australia, which makes absolutely positively no sense. So next time you think that fights don't get done because this person or that person is scared and they don't want to fight. No, a lot of times it's these type of things that prevent fights from happening again. That's why they're not needed. This is Marcus Watch on MTC Media with your latest episode of In the Corner.